Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is mindset, and the title is "Give Yourself Time." So this is something that came up to, recently with a client. We were talking about their level of success towards their current goals, and they kept kind of being negative on themselves, really beating themselves up for the things that they had yet to accomplish and or have become more consistent. And the big thing I was trying to get them to see was how far they had come so far and not only focusing on that finish line. So we've talked about something related to this in past podcast number 488, titled The Tough Love Balance, about how you have to be your own worst critic, but also be your best cheerleader. So you have to promote yourself as much as you critique yourself. And that's what I was discussing with them, was they were too critical in the sense that there is some critique needed. There's awareness of our kind of inadequacies, I guess you could say. But we need to be aware of the honesty of our efforts. Are we really doing the best we can do, or are there ways for us to improve? So we have to have that type of constant critique in where we ask ourselves to be better, and then once we become better, can we get even better from there? So one of the phrases I use often is bettering our best. So we try to be our best, and then once you could be your best, can you get any better? So there's that part. We have to have that awareness of what we have yet to improve upon and not give ourselves, not make up mistakes, not succumb to kind of our own kind of bullshit, basically, around why we think it's okay that we're not there yet, in the sense of it's okay if I stay here. Nah, you got to be a little more critical than that. Like you got to look and see, what am I messing up? How can I improve? And can I get there over time? Rather than just kind of believing in our own, bullcrap and thinking that right here is good enough. So always remember is, if here is where you stay, then here's where you stay. So if you're okay with the efforts you're putting in now, you better be okay with where you're at now. Because if you continue to put in the same effort, you're going to continue to be in the same place. So if you have yet to better the place, if you want a better place than what you have now, then you have to put in better effort than what you're putting in now. And that's the critique part of it, is you have to be critical of your efforts and see if there are ways to be more efficient, be more effective, just kind of constantly trying to work your efforts and see if there's a better way to do it. So that's one part of it. The other part is the cheerleader part. And this is what that client needed more of, was they kept looking at everything they were messing up, and they didn't see about the things they were getting right. And they had no concept of kind of like a timeline happening. So they just expected that when they had set their goal, they felt highly motivated, so they set these goals, they put together a plan, and they thought they would just do it. And it surprises me sometimes when people like in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or older are amazed that they can't just flip a switch and do the right thing. So it's amazing in the sense that as you get older as an adult, you realize that that's incredibly hard to do, if not impossible. So we have our normal habits, we have our kind of daily behaviors, we have our usual way of thinking. There's a lot that would have to change about who we are from day to day if we were expecting to change a behavior immediately. So we would have to be able to change our character immediately, change our thought process immediately, change our values, our priorities immediately. And often that doesn't happen. So what I was telling this person was, as is the title of this podcast, is give yourself time. So don't expect yourself to be perfect, just expect yourself to make progress. So we talked about three things in our conversation, and I thought they would be good to share. So I figured it'd be a good podcast on top of this. So this was a discussion we basically had with the client. And the first thing we looked at was, I said, are you making daily goals? Or are you just looking at large, more infrequent type things? So for example, somebody will say, is every month I want to blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, once you do that this month, the next goal is a month away. It's hard to stay motivated day to day by things that are that far away. Now, You can have a monthly goal that is built upon daily goals. So I'm not saying you can't have larger long-term goals, but you have to have the daily goals that get you there. And part of the reason why I like that is we were talking about in the conversation was if you think of a month as being 30 days, if you mess up 2 or 3 days and then you kind of think of it as daily goals, you'd realize, okay, I messed up Monday and Tuesday, but I can still get the rest of the week right. And if I get the rest of this week right, maybe I can lead into next week. If I only miss 1 or 2 days next week, that gives me 2 solid weeks where I got pretty good effort, and you can kind of build yourself up into that large monthly goal. Whereas if somebody just thinks of it as like per month at a time, then they're going to mess up Monday or Tuesday. They're going to say, oh man, I've already screwed up this month. What the hell is the point? Just give up. They only messed up 2 out of 30 days, and they already want to give up. Whereas they would have had the chance, now this isn't likely, but let's just say there's the opportunity, there's a chance for it, for them to go the next 28 days perfectly. They could have ended that month 28 out of 30, which would have been freaking amazing. But yet, 2 days into it, if they're thinking of a month at a time, they tend to just give up. So that's where having smaller, more frequent type goals, even intra-daily goals. So, okay, I have a lot of clients sometimes where they struggle to drink enough water. So I'll say, okay, by noon have this much in, by 4 p.m. have this much in, by 8 p.m. have this much in. So you can even have multiple goals within a single day, and that helps a lot. So that's something I think that's a big picture thing that it surprises me that people don't do it. And I don't know when I learned it. I just kind of lost touch of that. But I think I've always been that way, especially when I first started lifting and working out. So I've told before in past podcasts that my first ever physical goal was my 15th birthday. I decided to do 250 push-ups and 250 sit-ups every night as a way to get in better shape. So I'd already thought of it as every single day. So that my brain was just kind of, I got lucky and just thought of that like right away. But I have met people that they think daily goals are a waste of time. So they're like, oh, who cares if I only get one day right? I have to get a whole month right. And I'm like, yeah, but you can only get a whole month by every individual day. So you have to pay attention to the day if you want to get the month. So if I want to get a minute, I have to pay attention to a second. So it's kind of like you have to look at the small things to get the big things. And too often, way too often, people get caught up in the big things. So I hear people all the time in the strength world, like, I want to deadlift 600 pounds. Well, you can't deadlift 405. So how about we start with 405? Then we start about 455, then maybe like 495. So you want to take it in segments. And then also, if you want to do any of those, how did you eat today? Did you warm up properly today? Did you do your training properly today? Or did you blow through your warm up, do your heavy deadlifts, and then bullshit with friends? So you didn't really do any of the accessories after deadlift. So you say you want this big picture, but you're not doing the small picture things. So that isn't going to work. You can't get big goals without small efforts. And that's what we're looking at with those daily goals. So that was the first thing we set as kind of like a new change for the client. Was I wanted them by the next time we meet, they're going to list what they think are the daily goals that would lead them to a successful month. Then the other thing we talked about was percentages of correction, of doing things right, versus all or nothing kind of black or white thinking. So I actually told them an example of myself. Is I've talked about this in past podcasts. Is I have daily goals, and I track them on my phone every single day. I get a little check mark if I do it, and X if I don't, and that's it. There's no excuses. There's no place for excuses. You either did it or you didn't. All the bullshit goes to the side. So I've actually been working on 6 goals in my life every day, and I did not pick ones that are easy to do. So I have not been I have not been able to be 100% successful, and I knew that when I picked these goals. These are tough goals for me, but they're big goals, and they're things that I know would give me my best life if I were able to do them more frequently than less frequently. So I'm measuring them every day, knowing that it's not likely that I'm going to get them every day. But I like having that push and that drive to do so, to try to do so. So I don't get shut down by having to have a bad day, like not being able to list it. I actually get motivated by trying to have every day be perfect. Sometimes people get shut down by that type of expectation, it seems like too much pressure. So in a week, in 7 days, they might say, okay, can I have 4 successful days? So that way, if they mess up 1 or 2 days earlier in the week, they don't have to feel like they've ruined everything for the entire week and throw it all away. So in the past 3 weeks for me, I have been having full successful days where I got all 6 of my goals. I've actually been doing that like 5 to 6 times per week. So I'm missing 1 or 2 days. The previous 6 weeks before that, whenever it was over like Christmas holidays and all the craziness of scheduling, I was only having like 1 or 2 successful days a week because of just traveling and craziness and this and that. And then before that, I was still trying to figure out how to rework my schedule to where I could get those daily goals in correctly. So I'll give you an example of one of them was so I'm religious, so I believe in God, and I like listening to a sermon or like some kind of educational lesson on that stuff every day. So I had been listening to a 20 to 30 minute podcast in the mornings when I'd brush my teeth and take a shower and get ready. Well, I had to change my schedule recently, and it involved me having to take that process away. So I had to find a different way to fit in the sermons. So what I had to do is, it took me a while to learn this, unfortunately, because it seems very obvious now, is I realized, okay, if I can't get a 20 or 30 minute podcast in, instead of trying to set that the goal every day, and then trying to get it throughout the day here and there between things when I'm driving there, doing this, and it just feels like a stress, I said the whole point was, did I learn a message today? That was the big goal, not whether it was 20 or 30 minutes. So I found a podcast that I use now, and it has 5-minute lessons. So I listen to that on my commute to the gym every morning. Now, sometimes when I'm working out, I'll be able to listen to one of the longer podcasts, and I do that quite oftenly. But some days I don't get that. So all I get is that 5-minute lesson. But it has a Bible verse, it has a lesson with it, and it has a thought that I can then carry with me throughout the day and see if I can kind of put that to use or think through it or kind of analyze my actions towards that type of concept or whatever that sermon was. So it took me changing my goal from, well, actually, it was a warp of the goal. So the original goal was listen to a sermon every day. Then all of a sudden I had been able to do 20 or 30 minutes. So that became a standard that I thought I had to carry. And when I couldn't carry that standard, I felt like I was failing. I then had to redefine what that standard was by going back to the original definition, which was just listen to a sermon. So I downloaded the 5-minute podcast, and it's been going good from there. So often we have an original intent when it comes to our goals, but sometimes that gets warped, and we need to remind ourselves what the original intent was. So that's a big thing. And then recognizing that by me downgrading, quote unquote, from a 20-minute sermon to a 5-minute sermon, I was still learning a lesson. I was still getting positive things to work for that day. So even though there was less time investment, it didn't mean that there was a less kind of like equivalent positive result from it. So I had to kind of be open to redefining what my goals were throughout the process. Then, by allowing myself to redefine my goals but not lose the true purpose of the goal, it allowed me to understand that, okay, I can now do a better job of getting this in more frequently, and that way I can kind of stay on track of my goals. So rather than being stuck with the original definition and always feeling like I was missing out, I was willing to make a change and kind of adjust along the way. So the reason why I got into that, which wasn't even one of the lessons, was that I went from before, like say 3, 4, 5 months ago, being really infrequent, maybe one good successful day a week. And then the previous 6 weeks, like over the holidays kind of stuff, like I'd been doing like good, getting like 1 or 2 successfuls more consistently like every single week. And then the last 3 weeks I've been doing 4 to 5 successful days. So what it allowed me to realize was there was a progression of me getting better over time. I'm not perfect. But I didn't set perfect as my goal, because otherwise I'd be depressed and disappointed and almost want to give up. So if you set perfect as your goal, that will never happen. You have to be willing to modify that and recognize that I don't need to be perfect, I just want to make progress. So, can I do this right 4 out of 7 days a week? Once that becomes a consistency, then we go back to that concept of bettering your best. And can you maybe now get 5 out of 7 days a week? Right. So you have to be willing to accept that perfection isn't likely, and you're more required to look at, or it's better to look at, progress. Okay? And that falls into the last thing we talked about with that client was expect it to be a process. So they went into their thing thinking they have a plan, everything's going to be perfect now. No. So they have the right nutrition plan, they have the right training plan, but they have yet to create the right lifestyle around those plans, the right mindset for the choices. They have to redefine their priority list, people priority list, and just general priorities in life. So we talked about those type of structures. So I sent them podcasts about that. We actually talk about that, and they actually have homework based on their mental health. So these are things we include with training and nutrition programs when these things are holding back the effectiveness of the training and nutrition programs. So if somebody can't follow the program doesn't mean anything, right? So sometimes we have to look at the mental aspect and the emotional aspect of their lives and their health, so mental health, emotional health, to see if we can eventually get to the physical health. So we talked about it being a process, not an on and off switch. So they have to understand that it's going to take time to get things quote unquote right. So they have to accept the fact that if they can only get it 2 or 3 days out of the week, then that's going to be good because it's better than the 0 they're getting now. So again, it goes back to finding benefit in the daily goals, knowing that that's the only way to get to the big goals. So the only way to get to quote unquote perfect would be to get your percentages right. I have to be right 50% of the time before I can be right 100% of the time, right? So that's what we talked about. And that's something that I wanted to kind of just share in a podcast, was to give yourself time. Don't think of your goals as having to be on and off things, big things, like I have to change everything about my life right now today. No, it's not going to happen. And even if you can make it happen in a short term, it's never going to be sustainable long term. So give yourself time. How do you deal with your mental emotional states during that time? Go listen to podcast 488 titled The Tough Love Balance. So while you're processing the goals, while you're giving yourself time to make improvements, during that time you have to learn to be your own worst critic, but also your own best cheerleader. And that's what we talk about in podcast 488. So if you have set a goal for the new year, or if you've set a goal recently and it isn't going well, don't give up. Don't give up. Making significant changes in your life takes significant effort. And putting in that effort, making those changes is going to take time. So you have to walk before you can run, as they say. So give yourself time to make some mistakes, get a couple things right. Learn from those mistakes and get more things right. So give yourself time. Don't beat yourself up too much, okay? So if you do a really good job of being your own worst critic, make sure you're putting in just as much effort to be your own best cheerleader. Now, if you need any help with any of this, please reach out to us. Our email is brutalironGym@gmail.com. We're happy to help. We want to help you become your best self. That's why we have these podcasts available. So I appreciate you putting the time into listening to the podcast. And I want to make sure you get a better life from the podcast. So reach out if you need anything. Don't beat yourself up if you're making some mistakes. Just learn from them, move on, apply the lessons, and get better over time. Okay? So give yourself time. You can do it. Just give yourself time to do it. Okay, if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. Also, if you like the information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. The podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. You can tell us at our email at brutalironGym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening. And thank you for watching.